What's up, everybody? This is Grant, that cause artist. Welcome to episode 115 of the Disruptors for Good podcast. Today, we're going to speak with Bryan Buckley, the co-founder of Helmand Valley Growers Company and Battle Brothers Foundation, on fighting to bring medical cannabis to military veterans dealing with severe PTSD and who are at significant risk of suicide. As a special operations team commander with the Marines, Bryan led multiple teams in deployments in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Afghanistan. He was awarded the Bronze Star Medal and also awarded the Purple Heart Medal for the wounds he received during combat operations. After he and some friends got back from their service, they saw the severe issues facing their fellow soldiers and dealing with severe PTSD and suicides. And one of the co-founders, Andy, discovered cannabis, and it really sort of changed his life, helped him sleep, helped him actually find purpose. And now he's dealing with sustainable agriculture and studying that and becoming a pioneer sort of in the industry around growing. So it's a really interesting story. And Bryan kind of covers, what the company does from its consumer brand, which then funds the nonprofit that helps with these sort of medical cannabis side of things and getting legislators to really change the laws around the Department of Veteran Affairs being able to prescribe medical cannabis when a veteran walks in instead of receiving opioids. And the big statistic that jumped out to me was that when the U.S. military deploys to combat, roughly 60% of those deployed will be prescribed opioids upon return to the United States, and over half of them will develop a dependency or addiction to opioids. So obviously that's a very severe issue. It's caused many veterans to lose their way, even increased during the pandemic. Suicides have gone up amongst veterans. It's a powerful topic and conversation, so I really hope you enjoy it, and we'll talk soon. Thanks. Usually I like to start this by talking about people's journey. So thanks so much, Bryan, for joining me today. And I know your journey has been, very long and interesting and coming from a lot of different places where, most people don't come from, right? And get to do throughout their career. So let's kind of start there and maybe your sort of military background, your military journey. And kind of that seems to obviously come into play at starting the company HVGC and then obviously the nonprofit and helping veterans get through life sort of post-service, let's say. So just talk about your quick journey and then we'll dive into all the goodness.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great to be here and thanks for having me. And yeah, it's kind of interesting how it all started. I grew up in an area outside of Philadelphia called Doylestown in Pennsylvania and played for a really successful high school football team. And we usually were nationally ranked. And my junior year, we were playing in the Eastern State Final before the state final. And the opposing coach was a former coach at the Naval Academy. So I had a good game. And the next thing I started getting letters from the Naval Academy. And my dad was pretty excited. And I just had no desire to join the military whatsoever. So I get a call from Naval Academy, have you gotten a letter or an endorsement letter from a senator or a congressperson? And I'm like, no, I'm just not even thinking about it. And that was kind of that. So I went to the University of Massachusetts and was playing football. And then when I woke up one September morning, turned on the TV and I saw one of the towers was smoking. And my initial thought was, I didn't think 1993 was that bad. I just thought of the 93 bombing.
Right.
And then I get a phone call from my buddy who was at University of Michigan. He's a little bit hey, what is going on? I can't get a hold of anyone. I have to age myself here where I remind people back then in 2001, cell phones were kind of new and we were pretty much stuck to landlines. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, I think everyone's going to be fine. And the next, you saw the second plane hit the tower. And that's when you knew okay, essentially at that point, we all lost our innocence. So it kind of went through that day. Some classes were canceled. Some were kind of optional. No one really knew what was happening. Then I went down to the football complex and jumped up on the table to get taped up. And my trainer's like, I don't think we tape up today. So went out, we had this cubby locker. So I'm sitting there. We had 3 big screen TVs in the locker room and probably a dozen guys on our team from the New York City area. And they're a mess. And our coach came in and just said, why don't we go out and do a quick whiz practice where you just put a helmet on and get it fit. And I think he was more doing it with good intentions, maybe take our minds off of
sure.
And really what happened was one captain stood up and just said, I don't think we should practice today. He's like, not a problem. Why don't you guys just go home, call your loved ones, probably not playing this week and all that stuff. So went back, lived with 4 other football players in our apartment and, watching news like everyone else was. And I went into the bathroom and, as corny as it may sound, I just looked at myself and said, time for me to go earn my citizenship. And that's when I decided I was going to get into the military. So finished out the season and then informed my coaches what I was going to do and transferred to Villanova and went from like a 230-pound fullback to 185-pound midshipman. And
wow.
did 2 years at Villanova and then was commissioned into the Marine Corps. And that's when I started my military journey.
Your journey is quite impressive. And again, you don't have to speak on all of it, but maybe take us through sort of, what it was like to sort of be a Marine and kind of that's sort of where you found your co-founders. Am I correct?
Yeah. No, it was a great experience. I mean, I was just very humbled to be able to serve at the capacity I could. I mean, it's always kind of awkward at times when people thank me for my service. I think I should be thanking them for allowing me to go serve. And when I left Villanova, the way the Marine Corps goes, as a lieutenant, you go down back to Quantico, Virginia, and you go through a course called the basic course. And it doesn't matter if you're a pilot or a lawyer or whatever you're going to be in the military, you're all going to learn to be a provisional rifle platoon commander. And from there, that's about a 6-month course. Then you get your military occupation specialty, or MOS. And I went for infantry. So I got infantry, went through infantry officer course, then checked into my first unit, 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And I think after about 6 or 7 months after I checked in, we deployed to Fallujah, Iraq. And that deployment came back and they said, okay, you did a pretty nice job. Why don't we kind of speed things up and have you try out for Marine Recon? So took the Marine Recon induct, passed that. And 6 months later, went right back to Iraq. And then from there, when I returned, we just started the Marine Special Operations Command, now known as Marine Raiders. So they're like, why don't you go take selection? And went through selection, made it, and did deployments in Northwest Africa, also in Southeast Asia, and in Afghanistan, primarily in the Helmand province. And that's where, I met Andy and Matt, who are other co-founders of the organization. They were both Marine Raiders with me as well. And
so obviously, did you all get out at the same time, or did some kind of, was it staged to where
we kind of stagged? Like, I think I got out at the end of 2013. I think Andy was like a 2014-15 time frame, and Matt, I believe, was like a 2017 or 18 time frame. And really kind of what really started things for me was, I'm 100% disabled, and I started to see what was going on with our veterans, and not many nonprofits were helping to support our military personnel transition into their veteran life. There's more that have come on board since then, which is great. But I wanted to kind of make something there to kind of help them out. So developed Battle Brothers Foundation and put a 3-tier approach on it: personal, medical, and economic. And personal, it's more like a big brother, big sister. If you're transitioning out, you can talk to a battle brother and they just kind of could be that ear for you, because transitioning is a lot more difficult than military members think it is. On the medical side, we're able to help out VA disability claims. So if the vets weren't getting the VA rating they thought they deserved, we could go and take it over and resubmit and see if we could kind of enhance their score so they could receive all the benefits that they deserve. If we have veterans suffering with opiate or alcohol or post-traumatic stress and all that, we have the ability to get them to the treatment centers. But then the last part was the economic phase, where it's really job placement. Letting that veteran have that sense of purpose like they did while they served in the military, with the hopes of avoiding a mistake they can't come back from. And it was probably, back in like 2016, 2017, where, we just had a really rough deployment in 2012. And a lot of us were just trying to find answers at the bottom of the bottle. And Andy just looked great one week. And I was like, hey, what do you got going on? And he's like, well, I gave up a fifth of Jack for a joint. And you were kind of like, wow, that's pretty incredible. And he's like, I'm like, well, what's going on? He goes, well, it's like, I'm not like drinking and driving. I'm not blacking out at night. When I wake up in the morning, I feel refreshed. And I'm actually getting into cultivation, and it's helped me transition from a warrior to a gardener. And just thought that was like really impactful. So then had the opportunity to go meet some members of Congress and basically just ask them, what do we have to do to get medical cannabis into the VA system? And they're like, you need that, and you need American doctors. And really wanted to go down that path just because there's a lot of great veteran advocacy groups out there, but it just kind of kept going to the point where, we need to prove the science behind it. And even the members of Congress are like, I'll probably stand behind a closed door and say, yeah, it works, but I'm not going to walk out in public and say it.
Of course, yeah.
So, and I was like, all right, well, that's when we incorporate into Battle Brothers doing medical cannabis research. And we were able to partner up with a great firm called Niamedic Healthcare and Research Services out of Israel. And then during that, we were able to bring on actually University of California at Irvine to be our American face and to be our principal investigators, which was a huge win for us. But then we started kind of looking at like what the cost of this was going to be, because we were going to self-fund it. And we're like, man, this would be really, really costly. And the idea came from a Paul Newman salad dressing bottle, where it's just like 100% of profits go to charity. So we're like, well, maybe that can work, and talk to the lawyers and CPA, and they're like, that's totally legitimate. Profits are profits. Like, you can do what you want with it.
Yep.
And so that's what we started doing with our, we'll just self-fund it. And then we got very lucky at one point. I mean, now we're talking about at the 2019 timeframe, really bouncing around, trying to raise money, winning. I mean, there's so many things I passed over that were just like a blur, like winning cannabis licenses, like many of them. Not being able to fund them, power issues, all this stuff that you could think of, and just, kind of just getting grinded. And we had a really great investor kind of come on board, and he's self-made millionaire, was an Army Ranger, just a great guy, and was already in the kind of the cannabis world. And next thing you know, I mean, he's a stage 4 cancer survivor. And, we had a verbal agreement. He had to go on a vacation for a little bit, came back, had to go get his physical. We didn't hear from him for a little while. And then he called us up and basically told us he had to go into a semi-retirement mode because he didn't have cancer again. But basically, I guess his blood or whatever was kind of reading in the direction that things could get bad here. And the doctors kind of gave him, this is what you need to kind of look at. And, he's not the type of guy who would just throw money at us and hope we do well. He's a guy who needs to get involved. So we were really just sitting there like, oh man, like we thought we had it, we were ready to go. And now here we are back at square one. And a great company called Platinum Products that are ran by a father-son duo, George and Cody Sadler. They have a brand called React, where they will donate portions of their profits to it could be suicide awareness, breast cancer, homelessness, feeding the hungry, like a lot of great things. And then they also want to do veteran support, and they were having a hard time finding organizations that would actually take money from them to do that as cannabis. So they got in touch with me, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'll definitely take it. Yeah, we could use it. So went down for a meeting, and we pitched the idea of Helmand Valley Growers Company, basically what we're going to do and how there's going to be a for-profit brand, but with a purpose behind it to help fund our veteran medical cannabis research.
So the idea is have a front-facing sort of consumer brand, and then proceeds go to then the nonprofit part of things to sort of fund, the research and then the economic impact and the medical impact for sort of veterans trying to, whether it's suicide prevention or really sort of the opioid epidemic hitting veterans, finding an alternative care way to deal with sort of things, and medical cannabis seems to be what's out there that seems to be very effective, yet very sort of hard to do at scale, because it's like you said, the senators will behind closed doors or will say okay, but front facing it's a bit difficult from a political lens. So was that the pitch that you gave them, was start the consumer brand and go toward the
with the end state of we're gonna get a thing called an institutional review board, where that pretty much means you've been cleared to do human trials. You got to go from the big board, and they, it is a tough process, and they really like the idea. And they're like, your end state is to basically develop a formulation that's going to help out, to reduce symptoms of post-traumatic stress. We're like, yeah. And they're like, all right. And they kind of looked at each other like, get on in here and we're going to help support you guys. And they're like, basically what we ask of you is just make us whole. So whatever the cost of goods to get the thing on the shelf, we just ask you to pay that back. But all the profits you keep, we don't need it. And it was crazy. And so then basically we got in here, we thought we were going to launch this thing within like 2 months, and they kind of laughed at us like, yeah, good luck with that one. And
2 years.
the brand development, everything probably took us about 5 months or so to kind of get everything where we're ready to get onto the shelf. And then February 2nd, 2020, we made our first sale right before a global pandemic, mind you. And
of course.
So we had to muscle through that. But with our first $50,000 worth of profit, we put that back towards our research, and we were able to pay for a study design to be put together to go and present to the institutional review board. And we kind of kept going from there and kept growing the brand. And really on the institutional review board side, that probably took about another 6 to 7 months of having that approved, because we had to kind of retrain them. We didn't want to work with the NIDA program, or the National Institute of Drug Abuse out of the University of Mississippi. And we weren't going to take federal funding on, and they were kind of asking us for our DEA license and all this other stuff. And we're like, no, we want to achieve a private IRB so we can control the whole thing.
Yeah.
And basically we had a really, like I said, great staff at Niamedic, where our head guy is a gentleman named Dr. Victor Novak, who was at one point in his life in charge of Harvard's Clinical Research Institute, studied with Meshulam, all that stuff. And he's done a ton of FDA trials. And he basically got it to the point where they could get it approved. And in February of this year, we got it approved. So basically a year after we got our first sale, we got the IRB. And right now we're
what does that allow? What does that essentially allow?
Well, it means you can do human trials using medical cannabis. So if you don't have an IRB, the medical world won't take you serious. You couldn't publish in a medical journal or anything like that. It just wouldn't have the whole peer reviewed and all that stuff. So really what will happen is the Israelis are going to be running this thing with the American doctors right next to them. And Dr. Marcela Dominguez from UC Irvine, she's going to be the principal investigator, and she'll be the one kind of saying, yep, that is correct. That works. That works. That works. And there's our American face for the legislators. And, right now we're looking at this. The first one will be about 60 veterans. From that study, we'll have enough information to make a recommended treatment protocol and develop a formulation. We'll do a more little grand scale kind of one with about 300 veterans, 200 to 300 veterans here in California. And once we kind of dial in that formulation and protocol, we're going to move into what probably will most likely be Michigan and do another retrospective study to just validate that we're getting the same results as we did in California. The formulation is repeatable and accessible. And at that point, we're pretty much rounds complete, and we'll go back in front of Congress and raise our right hands and say, here's your data and here's your American doctors, and we need to proceed with FDA trials.
And the end goal being that this is allowed to basically be incorporated in sort of the VA prescription protocol and the ability for veterans to go to VA and get prescribed medical cannabis. Like what would sort of be the end goal?
The end state for us, kind of like
thing at the end of the day.
What we're facing on in terms of the veteran angle is we want this to be available in the VA pharmacy. So if you go in and you're like, hey, I have post-traumatic stress, and they're like, yep, you do, and you need to go get a gram of this and come see me or whatever. But it's not like the legislators are just going to be like, only veterans can access this through the VA. What that will do is that'll kick open the door to make medical cannabis federally legal in the United States, and will help all patients. Right. And, we'll see how things go with interstate commerce and things on the downside and the medical side. But that's kind of the end state. And what's nice is it's just like we're not like a lone wolf out there doing this by ourselves. There are a lot of other organizations doing research on different aspects of what cannabis can do for a medicinal value. So I think once you kind of get hit by a perfect storm of you're going to have like, a bunch of different studies coming in at different times. I mean, they just can't ignore the numbers. And pretty much everyone's bullish, but we know it works because the Israelis have already proven it works, and they've published in PubMed and they're showing it. We just need to put the American face on it. Is
the trial specifically geared toward some symptom, like whether it's, sleep disorder or, post-traumatic stress or suicide prevention? I guess, are there certain specific issues that these specific trials that you alluded to earlier are trying to capture?
Yeah, so this will be, we're looking at the official title is to see if medical cannabis can reduce the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay.
And so we'll probably really put a premium on, pain, anxiety, and sleep. Those are kind of the three big things that people really struggle with when they have post-traumatic stress, from whatever their post-traumatic stress could be from. I'm very big to tell everyone, post-traumatic stress is just not a military issue. It's a human condition.
Yeah.
We all can get it for various reasons. And so that's why I just think, instead of having something that we refer to as a VA cocktail, where we're taking uppers and downers and lefts and rights and other things to counter what we're taking, and you're up to 15 pills, you might be able to get it through a tincture or a pill form of medical cannabis and have the same effects with not putting any pharmaceutical kind of stuff like that inside of you. So it's pretty exciting. I mean, there's just so much untapped potential with cannabis. It's going to be a really exciting decade, I think, to kind of figure out all the benefits that this plant can provide.
What was your sort of background or sort of relationship with cannabis for all this? Did you come from a background understanding sort of what it can do? Was it after you served that, Andy kind of introduced you to sort of the positive side of it? We all know the sort of negative side that is put in our brains at a very young age. But, over the years now, there's so many positive angles towards it if used properly. Like, what's sort of your relationship with it? What were you surprised with maybe when you got into this world?
Yeah, I never really consumed cannabis at all growing up. It just wasn't my thing. I mean, I was really big in athletics, so I kind of just lived a clean lifestyle. But I never really had an issue. I mean, from what I could see with people who would consume cannabis, there wasn't anything crazy with them. They was kind of chill out, whatever, maybe laugh, have a good time. But it wasn't anything like we were like, oh no, someone's smoking cannabis again. Like, watch out. It's not like, versus like drinking. That's maybe you hear more of those stories. It's just when you kind of go through everything that we've been through and the pain and all the suffering you're kind of dealing with, and the VA is doing the best they can with what they have, but it's just not necessarily answering the bill for you. It was just kind of one of those things where, I trust Andy. And when he said what it was doing for him, I'm like, well, let me go and try it myself. Mm-hmm. And it was the first night I got a full night of sleep, and I don't know how long. And that's when I'm like, okay, there's something here.
Yeah.
And, kept getting the same results. And, I tell people it's funny. It's like, I never thought I'd hear my wife say to me, can you go and smoke some cannabis when I'm not able to sleep at night and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. For the love of the marriage, I'll go do this. But, so it's just kind of, it's comical like that. But I think a lot of fun on the journey too, where in 2016, when I started talking to, higher ranking military officers about things I wanted to accomplish and whatnot. And, you kind of got the stink eye in terms of like, oh God, like, cannabis, what are you doing? Well, now those same people are kind of turning around saying, we're commending you for what you're doing. This is amazing work. And I mean, the veterans need this. And it's just kind of funny how like hearts and minds have changed. But people are kind of keeping an open mind. And unfortunately, it was just through a perfect storm of events of seeing veterans dealing with an opioid and suicide epidemic, just really kind of turned people saying, we got to figure out a way to kind of help these people.
Is that would seem to be almost a much, I guess easy is the bad word to use, but a much more less sort of like conversation when you have to like try to preach a certain thing, when you talk to these senators or legislators around like, look, our veterans are, not being taken care of properly. If the suicide rate is still going up, the medication is obviously not working, right? Yeah. Like opioids haven't done, what perhaps they thought it would do or whatever it may be. And so I guess I'm trying to understand why it's so difficult when we have a system not, working properly. Like, why is it so difficult that essentially heroin can be approved?
Yeah.
Right. But then cannabis has to go through these like overwhelming hurdles. There seems to be a disconnect there.
Well, that's when you kind of get into the politics side where you got to look back at, when Richard Nixon, basically declared the war on drugs. And, even if you go way back in history, as like there was cannabis was used in a lot of medicines back in the day. And then it kind of got the name marijuana, and we're trying to say the Mexicans coming up were losing their mind, and you got reefer madness and you got Nixon. And listen, I'm a very big proponent of term limits, because you still have people in Congress and you have people in the executive branch, like Mr. Biden, who
75.
They were not fans of cannabis. And, for example, I say, the current president of the United States wrote the crime bill, which was one of the biggest swipes at this whole community. And I don't know why people aren't amazed that there's no progressive cannabis stuff going on right now.
Right,
it's like, you gotta look at these people's backgrounds. So I think now they're starting to change their color a little bit on it, just because they're seeing the overwhelming support. I mean, we've talked to, there was one gentleman in Arizona we're talking to, and great guy, but there's one study where it showed 86% of the Arizonans who were polled said they support the VA giving medical cannabis to veterans. And I'm like, the way the political climate is today, you can't get 86% of Americans who agree Monday falls on a Monday. So I'm like, that's pretty overwhelming. And so those are the things where, you got people who just make a career of being in Congress forever. Yeah. They are the ones kind of responsible for where we are right now. And it's kind of on us, where I'm not going to sit around and wait for the government to fix this. This is why we were motivated to do it ourselves and go forward. And, you got to look on the medical aspect too. It's like, we're doctors, they won't prescribe you a aspirin unless they know what's in it. And now you got like a triangle, and at the top of it, it's a Schedule I narcotic, so you can't do any research on it. So it's like, it was just kind of a mad kind of circle that no progress would ever get done. Yeah. So kind of just, instead of trying to go up that hill and walk up it and try to do it on the advocacy side and try to convince people, we're more or less just trying to walk around the hill and do it in a different way, and just kind of prove it through a way that we can actually control the study. I mean, even if you look at the NIDA program, I mean, I'm not sure that cannabis would pass third-party testing here in California. It usually comes in moldy. It's not stored properly. It's low THC quality. I mean, the name is in the organization, National Institute of Drug Abuse. So it's not like they're extremely motivated to prove the benefits of it. They're more or less showing the abuse of it. So, just kind of things like that. But again, I just think you've probably seen since 2016 such a shift on where people are with cannabis. I mean, one of the good things about the 2020 election was there were about 4 or 5 states that were pass cannabis, right. And it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't like front page in a newspaper. It wasn't the A block in the news. It was just like, well, these people are looking at cannabis too. Okay, big deal. It was like no one really cared, which is a good thing. That means it's getting normalized at that point.
I want to talk a little bit about the organizational side, and I know we touched on sort of the 3 pillars that you're focused on. But can you just walk us through maybe what you've seen come out of that, and maybe what are the programs showing or proving out on sort of the nonprofit side of things?
Yeah, with Battle Bros has been really great in terms of, helping out people with VA disability claims. I think one of our big wins was a Vietnam era veteran. He was in the Navy, and he's what they call blue water Navy. So he was like in the big ships in the ocean. And he served in Vietnam. He was off the coast of Vietnam. They were not approved for any Agent Orange illness until this year, actually. So he has Parkinson's, has had brain surgery, has had, part of his back has been fused. I mean, he's in rough shape, and it's definitely from Agent Orange. So we went and took that on, and we basically started looking at what the doctors were like, hey, 100% is 100%. And he had some post-traumatic stress issues. So we kind of went through that. And I think it was about 4 or 5 months of us working on it. And eventually he got approved for 100% disability. He woke up, there was a lump sum of money in his bank account, and people came in and started refurbishing his house and got him the appropriate wheelchair, and finally started taking care of this veteran the way they should have been for the past 30 years.
Wow.
And that was huge, because he was just kind of like, people actually care about me. He was kind of just feeling like, I served my country. Now I'm kind of on my own trying to figure this out.
Right.
And that was probably the best paycheck you could ever get, just seeing that big of a win for a great American hero. So those have been really good things. And, we've helped out guys who've been in special operations who by far, Purple Heart recipients, and guys who are just at 80%, and we're able to get them to 100%. And what's huge with that is it, not just good for the veteran, they're getting the care they deserve, but just the benefits it provides the family, where, the insurance aspect, if you live in certain states, you don't have to pay property taxes. Your kids are probably gonna get a full scholarship to school. I mean, it is a big deal.
Yeah.
So just doing that, it's just like you can't even put a monetary value on how much money you save these people, and how much you're going to kind of help their life out later down the line. So
but also emotionally that helps too.
Exactly. Just knowing, like, people care. I can't imagine if you, like, especially the Vietnam guys, they came back from war and people spit on them. And it's like, hey, we got drafted. What do you want us to do? Like, run up to Canada? It was kind of like one of those things. So that's been great. In terms of working with veterans who are suffering with certain ailments, where be alcoholism or opiate or PTS, that's been good. We've been able to help out some veterans. You can't help them all, unfortunately. Our director of treatment and recovery is just like, listen, it's going to be tough at times, because you're going to have everything going the right way, and then they're going to want to walk away and do something different. And it's like, the 12 steps are a real thing. And I think it's like the 3rd or 4th step where it's like, everything I did in my life has got me to this point. I need help. And if they can't accept help and then want to do it on their own, you're never going to get them there. And so we've had some vets had to walk away, and I hope they're doing well. And we've had some vets who've made it through, and it's been great. And, job placement side has been awesome. Helping out vets on that side, and just, we more or less do kind of like the guidance counselor question of, you got $1 million. What would you like to do with your life? And I like this. And what's going to really kind of start ramping things up is, with our partners like George and Cody, who I was talking about, we're looking to open up a cultivation site in this area called Lake Elsinore here. So it'll be about 5,000 square foot indoor grow.
Nice.
And then also a storefront. And from there, we're gonna be able to kind of bring veterans in to work with Andy, who's gonna be director of cultivation.
Amazing.
And have veterans making medicine for veterans. And there's a lot to be said about the agrotherapy. So that's gonna be really exciting, because it's fun, because a lot of veterans I talk to, they want to get into cannabis because it's kind of something new and something austere, and an austere environment type of deal, where it just seems really appealing, and the medical benefits that they're seeing from it, they just all want to get behind it. So I just think it's gonna be really tremendous when we get this whole thing kind of fully running.
To really build the entire ecosystem it's a beautiful thing, man. It's also a beautiful symphony of how capitalism and entrepreneurship can really, really work really well when you look at it from all sides of it, where you have the front consumer brand, you have sort of that fund, sort of the nonprofit aspect that then in turn employs people. It potentially could employ people that you've lifted out of the darkest time of their life, right? So
Yeah.
to speak. And to me, that's just the powerful cycle that, as entrepreneurs, that if you can build that infrastructure, to me, that it's such a great North Star for future people trying to build companies in whatever sector they are. I think
Yep.
looking at this ecosystem of how to build, that circular way of impact is tremendous, man. So I'm so glad y'all took that approach. And I think you get one win, you build on another, and you get another win, and so sort of hopefully the ecosystem will all come together, and that is possible. But
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to chat about you guys' entrepreneurship journey, because after you serve, different paths many can take, right? So
Yeah.
I guess what was that journey like, and just diving into becoming like a business owner and all the crazy shit that entails, especially within this industry.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, they definitely don't give you like a playbook, right? So when I left the military, I worked for an ed tech firm. Really learned like a good amount about business and sales, and it was a lot of fun. But I was there for about 3 years, and I kind of hit my end point, and I was kind of not really being fulfilled. And then I started really seeing what was going on again with the veteran community, and that's when talking with Andy and trying cannabis and thinking about some ideas we could do and having those conversations with Congress. I walked downstairs and told my wife, I think we can help out some veterans here with medical cannabis, and she's like, yeah, let's go for it. So while she's pregnant with our first kid, I thought it was going to be pretty, like everything I did, like we kind of achieved pretty quick. And that's where you're thinking like, oh, we'll get this thing up and running and we're going to do this. And with 5 years, bang, we're done. And, we killed it. And man, were we wrong. I mean, it was just like, I tell everyone when you get into entrepreneurship, I mean, always keep your moral compass pointed true north, because good things will happen to you and good people are going to find you. And there's a lot, I tell people, it's like we were like patrolling the sewers looking for gold, and there's a lot of bullshit down there. I mean, there were just people jumping on saying we can get this for you, do that, kind of trying to ride on our coattails of our past. And it was bad. I mean, I'll be honest, I got my teeth kicked in a couple times where it just was like, oh man, you just got to have that intestinal fortitude to keep driving. I mean, I heard this probably, I don't know, whatever, 6 months ago, year ago, everything blurs in. But Elon Musk was on that Clubhouse app when it first came out, and they were talking about entrepreneurships, and they're like, what word of advice would you give an entrepreneur? And he goes, or what words of encouragement would you give an entrepreneur? And he goes, if you need words of encouragement as an entrepreneur, you should not be an entrepreneur. I mean, it's like really like you're going to have to just get comfortable being uncomfortable, getting beaten down and punched and driving forward and just making things happen. And yeah, there's a lot of times, I mean, if you were laid out this playbook of how we got here to the point that we are now, I would have been like, no way. I mean, this literally was like, we're on year 5 of this journey right now. And we're just getting our research up and going. So I don't know if I could have endured it, because it was a lot of, I mean, I'm still doing like the 15-hour day thing. And there were a lot of sleepless nights and everything like that. And, things are going well right now. We've been embraced by the cannabis community, and people believe that we're the real deal because we are. But it was a rough go. So, when I just tell people, if you're going to get into this, one, be prepared to get your butt kicked a lot of times. And if that doesn't make you happy, then don't do it. If you like nice food, don't do this. I mean, I eat my ramen and peanut butter jelly. The family's fed, they're good, but I kind of do what I got to do. And like I said, just keep your moral compass pointing true north, because there's going to be a lot of easy outs. But if you hit that easy button, it's easier to hit that thing more and more. And you're probably, especially in cannabis, you're probably going to go down a path that could have some problems that you don't want to be a part of. So there's still a lot of bad actors out there trying to do some shady things. So you just got to be careful, and you just got to protect yourself, and make sure you have a lawyer and a CPA.
Yeah, no, they're doing just fine. Yeah. They are the necessaries for sure.
Yes.
Where can people find the HVGC products? Is it just in California right now?
Yeah, so obviously people, in America, I mean, what we grow in the state, that's a legal state, it can only stay in that state. So right now we're in about, I think in the high 80s now in stores in California. So we're, start off down in San Diego, and we're starting to make more of an impact now in Northern California and kind of everything in between. So you can go onto our website and check us out at www.hvgcompany.com. And you can check out where we are located all around the place. We also have a great apparel line, so that can go international. So again, you can go on that website and check it out. And if you just want to help out and make a donation to Bowder Brothers Foundation, go to www.bowderbrothersfoundation.org. I'm a big proponent now, where I used to laugh when you hear commercials like every dollar counts. Trust me, every dollar counts. So, anything that people can spare, we are greatly appreciative of that.
I'll end on the last question, and usually it's a little bit about the future and maybe some of the goals that you and the team have.
Yeah.
So I know sometimes it can be a little tough to look out maybe 3 to 5 years, but when you guys are sitting back and kind of just chatting, what are some of the goals and successes you would like to see over sort of the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I'm looking like right now we're just about over $1 million company. Really, the next kind of near fight is to get that on the business side up to like a $5 million company. So that's going to bring on more headcounts and a couple different things and expansion of SKUs. But I think on the probably the research side is we think within about 3 years we're going to have pretty much everything kind of rounds complete at that point, ready to go. And once we kind of have that, I think it's at the point where you're going to have. I just really feel the way this will all kind of play out is pharmaceuticals are going to be comfortable, that they can start buying up companies that have proven the medical benefits of cannabis and they can start making money off of it. That will make people in Congress comfortable because they give them money so that they can continue to campaign and keep their job. And I really do think you're going to see cannabis just being medical cannabis, at least being descheduled. And I know it will be federally legal at that point. And I don't think adult use will be that far behind because, again, you kind of make the argument with people. Okay, if you go home and have 2 martinis, that's fine. But if you go home and smoke half a joint, you're like, you have a problem. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And I think with our generation growing up, we're just going to make it more normalized. So I think this thing will go for probably about another 3 to 5 years. And then I think that'll kind of be the point where, I think we've accomplished our mission. And then, we'll go and look and see what else we can start doing to kind of just, we're Marines. We just want to leave the place better than we found it. So we'll find something else to do as well.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Bryan. Tell the entire team thanks for their work and just their effort and grind, because obviously there's a lot of people in our society sort of suffering from a lot of different effects, right? Our veterans are the ones that should be at the top of that stack, being taken care of, and when that's not happening, it's disappointing to me as an American citizen, right? And as just a human as well. So I think as long as we can keep moving down that path and getting them the care that they need, the proper care, and not having the care be more detrimental than to what brought them to care, right? So I think that is one of the most important things in a righteous journey, my man. So best of luck over the next decade or so.
All right, my man. I appreciate it.